Hey guys, this is Miss Arlequin, and in this video we are going to be learning about rhythm and repetition and the effect that they can have on a poem. Alright, so today we'll look at sound devices. So when we talk about rhyme and we talk about rhythm and we talk about repetition, those are all considered to be literary devices that a poet can use. Specifically, they fall under the umbrella of sound devices. So we're going to look at one of my favorite poems by Robert Frost, and probably one of the best poems to use when looking at sound devices. It's called Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. All right, so let's start off with the easiest sound device to identify rhyme. Which words in the Robert Frost poem were rhyming words? All right, so that's easy to see that there are the words know, though, and snow rhyme together. Queer, near, and year. Shake, mistake, and flake. And deep, keep, and sleep. As we read the poem a second time, listen not to the words, but to the sound of the poem. So what I really want you to focus on is the poem's rhythm or the beat of the poem. Stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. All right, so do you think that you could clap along to the poem? Do you know where you would put the claps? Clapping along to the beat of a poem is basically means that you're breaking the words into syllables. Everywhere there's a syllable, you're putting a clap. So this is a strategy that people use when they are trying to determine what the rhythm of a poem is. So you would go, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. All right, I messed up a little bit. There should have been an extra clap in there. But that's the basic idea around it. You start to track the claps so you can see what the pattern of the rhythm is, what the beat is. So you figure out where to clap along in Frost's poem, or it's pretty easy to do because the authors created a rhythm. Just like in music class, when we talk about rhythm, it's the pattern of the sound or the beat of a poem. And rhythm basically creates that musical quality, and it's really created through other sound devices like repetition and also the use of stressed and unstressed syllables. All right, so again, meter is the rhythm of a poem, and the beat is just one syllable. That's why we clap on the syllable. We're clapping out the beat. Now, stressed and unstressed syllables is something you may or may not have heard of before. Rhythm in writing is like the beat in music. And so in poetry, rhythm implies that there are certain words that are produced or said more forcefully than others, and they may be held for a longer duration. The sound of them is held for a little bit longer. So the repetition of a pattern that has emphasis like that is what produces a rhythmic effect. So when we're talking about those stressed syllables, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those words that are a little bit harder, that you have to use like a little bit more force as you say them. An easy way to think about it is to think about when you're reading a poem that has rhythm, you can kind of hear like a sing-songy quality to your voice. Your voice goes up a little bit on the stressed syllables and goes down on the unstressed syllables. So it's like, whose woods, you see how my voice is going up with woods? That's a stress syllable. Whose woods these are stress syllable. I think is the stress syllable. But there's other ways to even figure out if a syllable is stressed or unstressed. It's not 100% of the time. Just like in a lot of things with English, there's always exceptions. But in general, there are some rules that you can use to figure it out. The best way is always going to be to read it aloud and hear the stresses. But in general, nouns are usually stressed. Action verbs are usually stressed. Less important words like linking verbs like do, was, is, and conjunctions are usually not stressed. Those are usually the softer syllables. And then pronouns, this is where it's hard. They may or may not be, depending on the context. Sometimes if you start your sentence with a pronoun, it might be stressed, but if the pronoun comes in the middle, it might be unstressed. So you really have to just kind of see the context of the sentence and read it out loud to see what the other syllables are in the sentence. That also has an impact on it. Now, for multisyllabic words, it should be easier for you to hear where the stress is. Sometimes there are two, a primary stress and a secondary one. And whether or not you count the secondary as a stress is going to depend on the context. So again, the overall meter of the poem. All right, so here you've got discuss and discuss. So discus is this device right here that they used to use in the Olympics. You throw it, kind of similar to a frisbee. And this one, discuss, is having a conversation. You're discussing something. So even though these are both two-syllable words, depending on the actual word and then the sentence it's used in, the stress is going to be in different places. In discuss, the first syllable is stressed. In discuss, even though it is the same letters and the same sound, the second half of the word is what's stressed, the cuss part. All right, so here you've got some examples of nouns and verbs. We can see the syllables. The part of the word that is stressed is written in all capital letters. So project, project. But then if you use it as a verb, like you're projecting your voice, the second half of the word is stress. Project, object, object, convict, convict. So this is a really great example. You can see the words are the same, but the way you use them in the sentence completely changes how you pronounce the word. And that's part of what the stressed and unstressed syllable does. It kind of dictates how you pronounce the word. If the syllable is stressed, you pronounce it differently than if it is unstressed. All right, so we know that all of this is helping us kind of develop the rhythm of the writing. Now, when we talk about the rhythm, we've got to use adjectives. We're describing the rhythm, so we have to think about the sound devices that develop that rhythm and then the effect that it has on us as the listeners, the audience, or the readers. So you could describe rhythm as rapid and fast pace. Now, usually the devices that are going to develop that are going to be internal rhyme, masculine rhyme, and shorter lines. If there's a slow and steady rhythm, that's usually going to be developed through the use of alliteration, longer lines, and more feminine rhymes. Regular rhythm is going to be developed through the use of couplets throughout the poem, consistent line lengths, and a set meter, a set pattern to the beats. So you would really have, again, the same pattern of beats because the lines are the same length. So you're having very close to the same amount of syllables in each line. An irregular rhythm would be there's different line lengths, there's no set meter, and no set rhyme scheme. A rising rhythm, where your voice is going up, up, and up, is a bouncy kind of beat. So your voice is bouncing up and down. Usually that's created because there's a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. But on the other hand, you could also have a falling rhythm, and that's not as bouncy a beat. Your voice falls down as the line goes on because there are more unstressed syllables at the end of the line. All right, so what else creates and affects rhythm? So we know rhyme is a major factor in this. Rhyme creates harmony. And harmony is that feeling of completeness, that feeling of unity, that something has been resolved or completed. Now, internal rhyme is an effect that can add particular emphasis and also quicken the pace of the rhythm. If you have two words within a line that are rhyming with each other, it calls attention to that line and it calls attention to those words. Masculine rhyme are those one-syllable rhymes, and it makes what you're reading sound very settled and determined, strong. Feminine rhyme are those two-syllable rhymes like muddle puddle. That makes it sound a little bit more fluid, a little bit more musical. So if you wanted to create flowing, quick, smooth rhymes, you would want to use the more two-syllable rhymes. Quick and harder, masculine rhyme. All right, so what else does rhyme do? Rhyme can create emphasis, as I mentioned in the previous slide. So when two words rhyme, you notice them. And poets can exploit this by using rhyme to emphasize important words. So once again, when you've got those rhyming words, it calls your attention to it. It's a way to emphasize it. There are two particular ways that this can be done. If you use rhyme frequently and if you use internal rhyme. Rhyme can also have a comic effect, which is why children's poets, especially poets like Shel Silverstein and Jack Prelutsky, who write funny children's poems, they tend to use rhyme a lot. Especially if it's a short line poem, then it makes it even usually more comedic. All right, so what creates and affects rhythm? Repetition is the second thing. It's a way that poets create rhythm in their work. And repetition also, just like everything else, relates to the meaning of a poem. Poets don't repeat lines that are unimportant. They repeat the lines that tell the reader something important to the message, to the central idea, or a key idea, something that they don't want the reader to miss. So the structure of a poem is going to include its rhythm, and like every other device, it is going to contribute to its meaning. So as we look back at our poems in class, we're really going to focus on the way the structure is developed through the use of these sound devices.